When will the Denver Broncos start to embrace the youth movement with some of their young, explosive playmakers on offense? Well, that's one of the mailbag questions that one avid listener and viewer of the show sent in, and you're going to get all that. So pour yourself a cup of coffee and join us for today's episode of Good Morning Broncos. Good morning, Broncos country. Welcome into another episode of G&B, your daily bite-sized Denver Broncos conversation with a cup of coffee here on Mile High Sports YouTube page. We just surpassed over 3K subscribers here on the channel. So if you're a Denver sports fan, you love the Denver Broncos, Colorado Avalanche, the Denver Nuggets. Media Day just happened, by the way. We'll have coverage and content for you here on MHS's YouTube, plus Colorado Rockies coverage from Drew Kreisman. Mile High Sports is the place to be every team, every day. And it would mean the world to us if you hit that subscribe or that follow button. And also, we're also on Instagram. We're on TikTok. We've got a lot of great content over there. So make sure you go to those social media websites, hit that subscribe or that follow button as well. So you're never in the dark. What's going on with Colorado sports here? I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter for Mile High Sports. Special shout out to our friends over there, Superbook Sports, for today's episode of the show here. And look, there's a very important topic of discussion that's been kind of creeping up in the last couple of weeks here as it pertains to the Denver Broncos, not necessarily on the win-loss standpoint, but more along the lines of what can the Denver Broncos do to get some other people involved in the action? And that's a lot of these young guys. So shout out to my man, newtype_JK47 on Twitter, sends in the questions. When will the Broncos embrace more of a youth movement to allow players like Marvin Mims and Jaleel McLaughlin more snaps and playing time? They have both performed well over initial expectations to earn it, especially McLaughlin last Sunday fighting to carry the offense to victory. This is a great question there, obviously, from our friend newtype_JK47. And I'm in agreement with you here because one thing we talked about last week on Good Morning Broncos was Marvin Mims, right? He's been a bright spot so far this season for Denver in the pass receiving department. I mean, week 2 catches, $113 and a touchdown. I think he had 3 catches, 70-something yards against the Miami Dolphins. And then he had a big 49-yard reception this past week against the Chicago Bears in the fourth quarter that helped set up the game-winning Will Lutz 51-yard field goal. So why can't we see more Marvin Mims and Jaleel McLaughlin? 104 total yards from scrimmage, 1 receiving touchdown out of the backfield from Russell Wilson. These two young guys here, and I would say outside of just offense, you look at Denver defensively as well, a couple of the players that we're going to highlight here. Young guys are contributing in a big way so far for the Broncos this season. That's good. That means as much flack as general manager George Paton is getting, a lot of these young guys that he's brought onto the team, he's evaluated. They've made these decisions with coaching staff, say, hey, does this guy fit the vision for what we want? And yes, we're seeing that start to pan out a little bit. Nick Bonito, we didn't see it as a rookie, but man, this year, Nick is balling. He's having a career year coming off a 2.5 sack performance against the Bears. Jonathan Cooper, a 7th-round pick in George Paton's first NFL draft. I mean, George Paton is getting a lot of flack from what's happened with the Broncos, the record that they're at. He's done a really good job, in my opinion, in the draft department. And look, he's made some free agency signings that have made the Broncos better. Some moves have worked, some moves haven't. But overall, his draft rate, a big success so far. And you're getting a little more clarity on some of these young guys that we had questions about, I think, coming into the season. So great question here. Marvin Mims, we asked it last week against the Dolphins, only had 15 snaps. We said, okay, hey, is he going to be more involved in the game plan? Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news here, folks, but he only had 17 offensive snaps against the Chicago Bears. So I think so much is contingent upon personnel. But, man, in my opinion, Marvin Mims has earned the opportunity to get more snaps, get more reps here inside of the Broncos offense. And, I think every week that he has an impact play, it's just going to, I think, further along the line showcase why he deserves more playing time. Or, maybe this is just for him as a rookie. You're not throwing everything at him all at once, but it looks like he can handle it, to be honest with you. It looks like he's in a position where it's like the moment's not too big for a guy like him. Being able to track the ball downfield, great concentration, great speed, great ability to move after the catch. I mean, this is why you got to see a little bit more of him. Same thing with Jaleel McLaughlin. And obviously, Javonte Williams' injury on Sunday against the Bears impacted a hip flexor day-to-day here, according to reports from Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network. But Jaleel's a guy, in my opinion, as well. Even when Javonte's healthy, Samaje Perine is healthy, you got to find a way to use him. Like, Jaleel, in my opinion, could be perfect for the Joker role, like a guy who can catch out of the backfield, because he can do that. A guy who's explosive in the run game. He certainly did that. 7 carries, 72 yards in Sunday's victory against the Chicago Bears. I think that they will eventually embrace a youth movement, but I think they should lean into it and continue to go a little bit further here. You got a lot of young guys that are playing and stepping up into roles here. And I think it's good. I think it's good to see that versus just, obviously you want your veterans to play good, but you invested draft capital in some of these young guys. You took a chance on them as undrafted rookie free agents and they're playing well. I think you got to keep running with that and keep developing these guys, and more playing time, I think, will help the Broncos. And when you talk about building blocks, a lot of people are saying, hey, tear it down, rebuild it. Denver may not need a full-on rebuild, contrary to that being the popular narrative right now in Broncos country. Denver's got some issues they have to solve. A rebuild doesn't necessarily do that. Denver has, I think, the ability to fluctuate and be flexible here and still compete. But, the idea the rebuild is going to change everything, like it's not. Look, I understand there's pros to a rebuild. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that there's not. But I'm saying that there's no guarantee that it's going to work. And then what? If it doesn't work, then what, right? You really have to have a really good solidified plan in place. You have to have a good nucleus around you of core players. Like when Peyton Manning came to the Denver Broncos, they had some really good defensive players, but they had some core young players that were developing on the offensive side of the ball. That was an allure here for Peyton Manning. And obviously Peyton helped elevate those guys. Russell Wilson is elevating some of these other guys as well. And I think that can't be ignored, contrary to the fact that a lot of Broncos fans want to get rid of Russell Wilson. Russ is playing really good so far for the Broncos this season. I don't get how the narrative suddenly shifted that he's playing good football, but the Broncos still need to get rid of him. In my opinion, I don't agree with that at all. I think Russ has been a big, big turnaround so far for Denver this season. But, getting some of those young guys involved, I think, and pairing them with a guy like Russell Wilson, I think is going to help them thrive and maybe gain more experience. That's all I'm trying to say here. But yes, fantastic question to kick off today's episode of the Mailbag here. Good Morning Broncos. Our next question comes in from @orange_crush512 on Twitter. He asked the question, what has been holding J.L. Skinner back from being active the last couple of games with Justin Simmons being out? I thought we'd see him for sure. Now with P.J. Locke and Justin Simmons coming back, it just seems he missed the window to be active for game day. I think this is a great question, and I think this is something a lot of Broncos fans have here. And I'll be honest, just based on what I saw, like there were things about J.L. Skinner, obviously, for him. He suffered the biceps injury. He came along during rookie minicamp, missed a little bit of time, but then was ready to go for, mandatory minicamp, OTAs, training camp. You got to see a little bit of him there. And in the preseason, now he's a thumper, but JL, in my opinion, and I think maybe the team feels the same way. It's not an indictment on him. Obviously, he made the 53-man roster for a reason. J.L. Skinner, I think, still has to develop more, right? And I think that there are valid arguments for us to sit here and say, okay, how can you develop a guy if he's not going to play? All right, playing time is a great way to develop a guy. For me, what I saw in the preseason now, I would say, okay, I don't know if he's ready yet for that defensive role, is because, he'd come up and, man, he hits hard. Don't get me wrong, but there were several times in the preseason he'd come up to try to deliver a massive hit. He'd hit the guy, but it wouldn't bring him down. He doesn't wrap up, doesn't drive through. Like, that's something he can obviously fix. That's coachable. That's fixable. Don't get me wrong on that. But I just don't think he's ready for a defensive role just yet. In my opinion, where we need to see J.L. Skinner make progress this season, and, it doesn't matter if he redshirts this year. I mean, this, for some guys like him and Alex Forsythe, I think this is kind of a redshirt season for them. But if they're going to get playing time, they have to make their hay on special teams. And right now, that the Broncos have a lot of guys. I mean, they have one of the best special teams units right now in the NFL when you talk about kick coverage, return coverage, setting things up, and also in the punting game. And obviously, Will Lutz making a 51-yard field goal this past week is great, but right now, Denver's got some guys. Now, barring injuries, right? Injuries can change things. Denver's got some guys, in my opinion, that are stepping up right now on special teams that maybe make it a little difficult for J.L. Skinner to see the field right now. And that's not a bad thing. Like, you got to look at it from the case of Jaquan McMillan last year. The entire season, sat in the practice squad, prepared like he was going to play, even though he was a practice squad player and didn't think he was ever going to get called up. Week 18, he gets called up, rises to the test, rises to the occasion in a big-time way. J.L. Skinner needs to do a lot of that, in my opinion, which I think will help him in his game. And obviously, he's got some great guys in there. You mentioned Justin Simmons, Kareem Jackson, P.J. Locke, Caden Stearns, even though he's injured. Like, Caden is a great resource as well for a lot of these young guys. And so that safety room, I know they're very close. They bond well. J.L. has always kind of been in some good spirits, even though he's not playing, which, it's got to be tough. But you know what? I think he's grateful to be in the NFL. He's grateful for the opportunity to learn and grow. But now with P.J. Locke and Justin more than likely coming back this week, something to monitor as a possibility, More than likely a redshirt year here for JL Skinner. I hope that answered your question there, my friend. Mike Kermy says, is the Broncos defense that far away that a rebuild is truly necessary? Hey, I'm glad you asked this. So we actually just briefly talked about this. And he says in parentheses, I don't think so. Here's the thing, Mike, and I agree, right? Obviously, the defense this year, it is the worst defense I've seen from the Broncos in quite some time. And obviously, you look at advanced metrics like DVOA. They say they're on par right now through 4 games to be the worst defense in NFL history. Certainly, when you allow 1,000 yards of total offense in 2 weeks combined, it's certainly not a great look. Almost, I think, if I'm not mistaken, they were just a couple of points off from allowing 100 points in totality in 2 games there. Sorry, I had to do my math. Wasn't my strong suit overall. But yeah, I think that the Broncos defense, a lot of the same personnel from last year is here in Denver. Now, for me, we've seen Sean Payton shake it up a little bit. We saw Nick Bonito and Jonathan Cooper start versus Randy Gregory getting the start. How does Baron Browning factor into that? I mean, I like Randy Gregory a lot. Getting to know him and just Randy's a genuine dude. He loves football. He's a good player. He's been through some stuff here. And obviously, he's going to get a lot of flack from fans and from other people because he got a massive contract in free agency and he's been banged up. But I'm a big Randy Gregory fan and believer here. I wonder when Baron Browning comes back, how that impacts the edge rusher rotation, because you also have Frank Clark, who's supposed to come back this week as well. Obviously, Randy hasn't had the greatest start to this season yet, but I still think Randy could be an impact player for Denver. I wouldn't even be opposed to Denver maybe moving some guys to defensive end. Now, I hate to ever signal anybody out. I just think that the Broncos' interior defensive line, there's been times where Zach Allen's been held, there's been double teamed. There's been times where DJ Jones has been double teamed. And, the defensive line has kind of got cotton washed a little bit here. And Jonathan Harris has struggled a little bit. I think that Denver, the stunts that they're trying to run on the defensive line, a lot of the times, and this even dates back to the preseason, these guys are all running into each other at times. Like, when you're stunting one way, you're supposed to create a hole and an opportunity for a guy to come free or to open things up. And we just see guys running into each other. We see guys trying to spin and they're just getting wham blasted by a guard and a center combination. Like, this has got to change it on the D line. In my opinion, I think Denver needs a premier edge rusher. And look, I think that you have 2 young guys in Nick Bonito, Jonathan Cooper, who obviously stepped up in a big way this past week. Can these guys emerge into an elite pass rusher? It's a question right now. They can, absolutely. I think they have the talent, the athleticism to do that, but they've got to be dominant. They've got to be consistent, not only just in the pass rush department, but against the run. They have to be able to do these things. We haven't seen it yet, and I think that we will get to a point there, but I don't see Denver going out there and trying to, sign a massive, big name pass rusher, because there really aren't many. Like, really good pass rushers never really hit the free agency market that often, unless it's like they're at the end of their rookie deal and they want to go test elsewhere. We've seen that happen before. So I think that is definitely something to keep an eye on here if you're a Broncos fan. But the Broncos defensive scheme is the same as last year. It's just being called by somebody different that has never honestly really called this type of scheme before. And he's kind of jumped into buying it. Like, that's one reason he got hired. Look, Sean Payton wanted to bring in Vic Fangio. Vic didn't want to come back to Denver because it was just too soon. There was a lot of stuff that, happened when he was here initially as the head coach. It just felt like a weird situation for Vic. Then he wanted Ejiro Evero to stay on staff. Evero did not want to have anything to do with the Denver Broncos after what happened with Nathaniel Hackett and the Broncos firing him in his first season, not even finishing his first season there. So Evero was never an option there. I mean, there's other guys. Yeah, the Fangio tree is expanding in terms of the scheme there. And for Vance, this is a learning curve, but this is also an opportunity, I think, for him to learn it. And if he can't learn it, then you have a guy like Christian Parker, who is expected to get defensive coordinator interview requests here this offseason. He's a young, up-and-coming, rising star of a coach, and Denver's got him in-house, and Sean Payton may have to say, you know what, we're going to go with Christian Parker going forward. I mean, that's not something I would be opposed to, and it sounds like, for me, it sounds like in my position sitting here, sounds like I'm bashing Vance Joseph. And look, Vance is a great coach, and the tough thing is, like, when you're not executing, like when your defense isn't performing well, and everything just looks vanilla and basic, like it's easy to get caught up in like, the coach stinks. Like, Vance obviously has to do a better job, but it's not all on Vance Joseph exclusively. And I think we just have to remind people that football, your coordinator and putting you in a scheme is obviously very important, but also players got to go out there and execute. And I think players have come to bat and they've come to defend Vance Joseph a little bit, which you love to see that from your players, but the defense has to figure it out and the pressure's on them for sure. But I don't think that a rebuild is truly necessary at this point. Mike, this is a fantastic question. Denver just spent a lot of money on Ben Powers, Mike McGlinchey. You have the Russell Wilson contract. People keep saying, oh, well, they can get out of it. They're not going to take that much dead cap to move on from it. And Russ hasn't been the issue this year. So see what you have in this moment, right? In the next couple of years, Russ's salary cap, his dead cap, hit is going to go down drastically to the point where you feel like if you need to bring in a young guy, let him learn from Russell Wilson, right? Like let him be able to get that valuable experience. And I know once again, it's like, how can you get a young quarterback to get valuable experience when he sits the bench? It worked wonders for Patrick Mahomes, learning from Alex Smith. And for the NFL, it's just such a big adjustment from college to the pros that might actually benefit some young guys in certain situations. But I always say the biggest thing, the environment, if you're going to rebuild, tear it all down, the environment in which you have is the most determining factor as to what type of trajectory you're going to go on. And it's not just straight up. It can be you go up a step, you go down 2 steps, you go up, and then you go down another 2. Like that's how the NFL works. That's how football works. And I think so many people don't realize what it takes to do roster construction, salary cap, making sure that you follow that and making sure you have enough quality guys. And that's, I think if you embrace the rebuild, you're going to have Broncos fans going to have some rough years. And I get it. They're like, well, we've been putting a Band-Aid on everything for the last however many years. You have to find a way to just be relevant. You have to find a way to compete. And that's what Denver has done. They've taken those shots. They've taken those chances, obviously going out and trading for a coach, trading for Russell Wilson. I think that element will pay off, but I think Broncos fans are just so tired of the losing, and understandably so. They just want to tear it down and then start over. But it's not always greener on the other side there, folks. I'm just saying that's something to consider there as well. Justin Wagner says, do we all need to start cutting our sleeves off? Justin, I'll tell you this. Yes, we should. Or you know what? You don't have to cut your sleeves off. The reason Sean Payton cut his sleeves off is because they were too tight and that they didn't roll up a little bit. So you know what? Here's an easy fix for you. All you do, roll the sleeves up a little bit here. There we go. How about this? This will be our game day look on Sundays. If you're wearing a long sleeve or a hoodie, just roll your sleeves up. And we're good to go. Like that's the cheat code. That's Sean Payton. We're hacking the game right here. Do that. But that's a great question there, Justin. Chase Wellner says, is Nick Bonito on a path to returning the second round investment on him? Yes, I think he is. And we've seen that. Look, I tell you this, when I talk about a player, in my opinion, who's been the most improved player from OTAs all the way till now, Nick Bonito takes the cake by far, an entirely different player than what we saw last year. And I think a lot of it is, okay, you bring in a coach, obviously Jamar Cain, a pass rush specialist who has familiarity with him, and Ronnie Perkins, who's also on the team. But you understand, okay, these are what these players do well. How can we build on that while also getting them into a scheme that maybe fits what they do? And Nick Bonito, his breakout game, we saw it against Chicago. And I think so many people are looking at that Dolphins game. But here's the thing with the Dolphins. They get the ball out of their hands so quickly, it's hard to really evaluate pass rushers. I think Nick Bonito, obviously, an area where he has openly said himself he can improve is in the run game against the run. He is a really good pass rusher. He's a good guy, and he's emerging. I think he's emerging into a player that the Broncos say, hey, you know what? We knew this was going to take some development. He is on the path there, in my opinion. I think he's got off to a great start. Can he continue to be, someone who stacks on that? Can he be consistent? To me, I think that's an important thing to look at here. Wes Choate says, are we at a point that number 33, Javonte Williams, and number 38, Jaleel McLaughlin, rotate series, and Pete Ryan is just random third down goal line? You know what? This is an interesting question here, Wes, and I'm not sure exactly how to answer it, right? Because Javonte, if healthy, it needs to be your option that you try to get running. But Jaleel is such a change of pace guy, and I think it just depends on the circumstance and who you're playing and how a defensive front and the edge guys are playing you a little bit, what type of defense you're playing against. And you get a guy like Jaleel McLaughlin going a little bit. To me, that's also that's the tough dilemma, right? Because you look at P. Ryan, big body guy. Like if you're going to face stacked boxes, Javonte and P. Ryan are the two guys that make the most sense. But if you need to cut them up on the inside and then try to get them on the outside, Jaleel's a great change of pace guy. In my opinion, I think Denver should embrace and approach a full-on by committee utilization theory here for these guys at the running back position. But here's the biggest key. Denver's got to start taking the ball. If they win the coin toss, they got to start taking it to open things up versus putting the defense out there, maybe trailing 7-0, or as we saw in Miami, trailing 14-0 earlier, because you can't commit to the run game when you're trailing because it takes too much time off the clock. So that's the dilemma that we're in here. Mike DeCecco says, why is everything pain? Not everything has to be pain here. And look, I think this is something I feel is super important to bring up to Broncos fans. There are a lot of fans that are disappointed that Denver won on Sunday. And I just don't understand. Like, if you're a fan, the idea of being a fan, right, is to watch your team win games. You had fans blatantly upset that they lost. And, like, you just got to take it one week at a time. Like, being a fan of a sports team, like, for example, I don't have an NFL team that I'm a fan of. I love football. And so for me, I get to watch and enjoy every single game here. I'm a diehard Denver Nuggets fan, right? I'm a true on NBA Denver Nuggets fan. So you see some of my emotional takes on the Twitter timeline at times talking about the Denver Nuggets. It's because I'm a fan, right? You go through, there's pain points, but the idea is to see your team win, right? And I understand where Broncos fans are at. This team has not been a winning team for quite some time, the Denver Broncos. Not everything has to be pain. You know what? It wasn't pretty. It was ugly for Denver to come back from 28-7. But you know what? They did it. The comeback process was pretty. There were great moments in there that you can use and build on. Just enjoy that because that's all we get. We only get those moments. We don't know what's going to happen a day from now, 2 days from now. Enjoy the little things, Broncos country. Even in a season where there's questions about whether they're going to have a winning season or not, just enjoy the wins that you get. Not everything has got to be pain here. But last one we're going to get to here comes in from Larry Wesley. He says, why hasn't Riley Moss moved into the cornerback 2 role yet? Is he not developing? No, he's developing. He's going to play on special teams primarily. And look, as much as people are down on Damari Mathis, I think so many people have to realize how bad the defensive scheme in terms of the operation has been for Denver. They're playing a lot of cover 3. And so far, it's like what you see on a broadcast is a player like, so cover 3, Damari Mathis, his responsibility is deep third, right? Is to protect deep from the deep ball there. And sometimes based on a split or maybe a wide receiver personnel look, a coverage may shift, right? We've seen Denver run a lot of cover 6, which means you're playing flats on one side as a corner. The other side, cornerback's got deep third, and you're going to have safety who's going to be playing the half. And then you're going to have a safety who's playing kind of another quarter. It's going to be quarter, half here. One of the things that we see is just, okay, our receiver catches maybe an 8-yard dig route. That's the corner's fault. He's getting cooked. He's getting beat. Like, it is not that simple, folks. And Denver's been running a ton of zone coverage. Damari's good job is to protect deep, right? So when it's thrown short, he's got to rally and tackle. If it's thrown inside, he's maintaining outside leverage on some of those routes. And there's, he's got help on the inside. At points like that, that's just where you have to, as a defense, rally and tackle. But it's on the coach to put these guys in a position. I'm not down on Damari Mathis the way that so many people are here. Riley Moss, I think, will get his opportunity to play and contribute from a personnel standpoint, but he's working his way. He's on special teams right now, and he's going to get there all in due time. But Broncos country, thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode of Good Morning Broncos, our mailbag edition. If you ran out of coffee like I did, make sure you go pour yourself another cup. And hey, we're going to be back tomorrow for another episode of the show as we start taking a look at maybe some of the things we need to keep an eye on this week as the Broncos prepare for a Sunday afternoon showdown with the New York Jets. I'm Cody Roark. Make sure you subscribe or follow here on YouTube. Just a reminder, milehighsports.com for all the written coverage and content of all things Colorado sports. And we're also on social media, on Twitter at Mile High Sports, Instagram, TikTok. Follow us for all the amazing interactive content you're going to get there as well. I'm Cody Roark. See you tomorrow morning for a brand new episode of GMB.